Hello, everyone. My name is Corey, and I'm a content and support engineer here at Geocodio. Today, we're going to talk about how to easily integrate your Ruby or Rails application with the Geocodio API using a third-party Ruby library. Our primary goal is going to be to call the API and retrieve geocoded information about a single address. We will go over additional options like batch geocoding and adding appended fields in future videos. But for more information, be sure to check out the description below because I've given you access to our API docs, and there you can get really granular and get an idea of all the different options you'd have and the real power of what the Geocodio API could offer your application or website. But with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up VS Code. And we're going to go just to kind of give you an idea of my structure here so you can see what I'm working with. I took the liberty of generating a very, very simple Rails API application with a single controller that's called API calls controller. And this houses a right now blank method called call Geocodio. This is going to do exactly what it says. Basically, we're going to create an instance of the Geocodio library. Then we're going to use that to make a call to the Geocodio API regarding a specific address. And then finally, we're going to get that response and hopefully render that response probably as JSON, just so you can see an idea of how that data would be structured for you. I've also gone ahead and included a route. So when I spin up a server and go to my browser, if I enter /call_geocodio into my URL on the local host, that will trigger us to go ahead and use that action that I built in the API calls controller. So that's sort of the basic setup of everything. Obviously, your application is going to be different. Do this in whatever controller makes the most sense for you. I'm just trying to keep it very simple so you can see exactly what I'm doing without any particular clutter. So first up, we need to make sure we actually have access to the library. So I'm going to go ahead and install a new gem. It's going to be called Geocodio. Awesome. Very simple. And then we need to make sure we bundle install that so we have access to it. Get everything hooked up. It shouldn't take too long. And now that we have that, let's go back to our API calls controller. And we are going to require Geocodio. Awesome. And now we have access to that gem in our API calls controller. So everything's basically hooked up now. So where do we get started with actually creating an instance of the Geocodio library? So I'm going to do that by setting a variable. We'll call it Geocodio. And then we are going to create an instance of Geocodio client using a namespace there. You can see .new. And then in these parentheses here, you're going to want to add your API key. If you don't have an API key, you can get that on your dashboard in your account. It's very, very easy to generate. So just log in or sign up for an account and you should have access to that. Because of security reasons, I can't show you my API key. So what I've done is I'm using this .env Rails gem. You can actually see that in my gem file too. I put that right before Geocodio. And I have an environment file that actually contains the API key. And this way, if I were to push this up to GitHub or somewhere public where people could see the code, they won't actually be able to get the key too. So for security reasons, I definitely recommend doing something like this rather than just inserting the API key in line here. I don't think that would be the best option, but do what you got to do to get this working, at least if you're just trying it out. So let's go ahead. And because I have that .env Rails, I should be able to pass this in like this. So this should basically be the equivalent of my API key here. Cool. So with that taken care of, we now have an instance of the library ready to go for us to call methods on. So this is good. We're moving on. We can actually start really geocoding. So I'm going to go ahead and create another variable called response. And I'm going to set that to that new instance we just created, Geocodio. And on this, I'm going to call a special method that we now have available to us. And it's called Geocode. And inside the parentheses here, and you also want to have some square brackets, you can pass in an address, whatever address you'd like, your home address, work address. If you want to pass in the address of a local Starbucks, anything you want to do to try this out. If you have a form that's collecting a string, like an address string, you could even plug that in and get like really reactive data to anything you plug into that form. But for our purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and use this address. And if you don't know what that is the address to the Empire State Building. So something pretty universal that we can get some data about. And then once we've done this, if this all works correctly, we're going to get back our address formatted correctly. We're also going to get it parsed out for us, as well as coordinates like latitude and longitude, and a number of other pieces of data that you can use however you would like. So we're basically all ready to go, and we should be able to call the Geocodio API and get some data back. So let's go ahead and try to demonstrate that. We're going to render our JSON, basically just render this response variable as JSON. That's what we're hoping to get working here. Awesome. So to really show you that this is up and running and working, we're going to run a Rails server and pop open our browser here, localhost 3000. Believe it was called Geocodio, I think is the route that I created. So let's do that. Awesome. And we can see here we've gotten back a number of results. This top result is probably the most accurate one. And then we also have a number of others to just kind of give us some additional options if for whatever reason the primary return isn't correct. But 99% of the time, this is going to be the one that you're going to use. So we've got our JSON here now. So you could technically, with this information, start using the data that you've had returned and plugging that in and rendering it however you would like in your application. That said, I actually want to show you one more trick that we have up our sleeves here. We can actually do both forward geocoding, which is geocoding using an address, as well as reverse geocoding. So that's if you only have the coordinates for a location. So let me show you how that would work. Instead of using this .geocode method, you could use .reverse instead. And then instead of the address within this string, we're going to add some coordinates. Awesome. Now that we've got all that saved up, let's go ahead and restart our server. And I think we'll probably get the same response, but just in case, let's kind of take a look. So let's refresh this page. Yeah, this gives us a little bit more data here to work with, but you can see that we now are getting that same West 34th Street address. So we've got a bunch of additional data that we can use. So yeah, you can geocode forward using the address or in reverse using these coordinates. So that's an excellent sort of tool to have in your tool belt. Either use the .geocode method or the .reverse method, and this will let you use this particular tool for geocoding a single address or location. At this point, it's up to you to determine the best way to implement this data in your application. You can use Geocodio for any location-related needs, from autocorrecting addresses to populating census data to finding the best school district for your kids. Please feel free to comment below with any questions or feedback, and I'll do my best to answer as I can. If you'd like to try Geocodio, go to geocode.io/try to check out our spreadsheet uploader or create your own API key. You can make up to 2,500 lookups for free each day. Until next time, thanks so much for joining us.